War literature doesn't immediately bring to mind a barrel of laughs, but some writers have managed to eke out some dark comedy from the distressing situations they faced. None more so than Richard Hooker with MASH, or Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, which was inspired by his time serving in the Korean War. We act insane because if we didn't, we would most surely become insane. Richard Hooker was a pseudonym for Richard Hornberger, who had graduated from Cornell University Medical School only to be immediately drafted into the army to serve as a surgeon in the war in Korea. Following his time in the military, he practiced medicine in Maine while working on his novel for over a decade. It was published in 1968, and like many successful war novels, would almost immediately be made into a film.
Colonel Blake has secured for us the halls of Montezuma. So big, only the biggest of the screen could bring it to you all. Technicolors. Tell it to the Marines, those lovable lugs with wonderful mugs, so we now love more than ever. Tell them they're still the greatest guys in the world. Follow Lieutenant Punchy, Limey, Babyface, Doc, the poet, Pretty Boy, and Slattery through some of the most interesting war films yet created. Due to a possible camp infection, Arlene Chu's Hollywood Grill is now off limits, that is all.
MASH would soon become one of the most successful television series of all time, and although it was set during the Korean War, it strongly resonated with audiences who were witnessing the then ongoing Vietnam War. Vietnam would be the first conflict to be seen by civilians back home in the visual format rather than simply the written word. Perhaps this is why there are so many more well-known films that deal with Vietnam compared to written works. Directors who even served in the conflict, such as Oliver Stone, would translate their experiences on screen. But one highly celebrated author did turn their attention towards the war in Vietnam, which was ongoing long before America's involvement, Graham Greene. His work, The Quiet American, delved into the origins of the conflict. Sooner or later, one has to take sides if one is to remain human. Graham Greene worked as a war correspondent for both The Times and Le Figaro, covering the French Indochina War that had been ongoing since 1946 and would eventually develop into the Vietnam War itself. Once again, a successful war novel was quickly adapted for the big screen, and just as he'd done with The Red Badge of Courage, real-life World War II veteran Audie Murphy would star, taking on the role of the eponymous Quiet American.
Meet a couple of fellow warriors for democracy.
They're just kids. Now, what could they be expected to do if the communists attack?
Fire one shot, possibly, then try and disappear into the rice paddies.
Very sensible.
It's going to be a long night, I'm afraid. Still, there are 40 of these towers between us and Saigon. Better odds than a roulette.
We had some cards. We could teach them to play bridge.
Why not give them a lecture on national democracy? They're the perfect audience. Trapped.
You just don't believe in it at all, do you?
I believe that this wall is behind my back. I believe that those guns are loaded.
Two beliefs. Both confined to this hut at this minute. Both frightening.
The 1958 film was a critical success, but Graham Greene himself was unhappy with the significant changes made to his novel. The Quiet American has since become seen as a very prescient work that accurately predicted the extreme challenges that faced American involvement in Vietnam in the 20 years after Greene published his novel. In 2002, another adaptation was made starring Michael Caine that was more faithful to the author's original work.
What will they do to him? I promise you, my contact will act as gently as the situation allows. Sooner or later, Mr. Fowler, one has to take sides if one is to remain human.
With the emergence of the Cold War, the great powers of the era, the United States and the Soviet Union, were no longer able to fight each other directly. The invention of nuclear weapons and the status of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, meant that a completely new battlefield was being drawn up. And it was Tom Clancy who brilliantly captured this new era of techno-warfare that was being waged with his debut novel, The Hunt for Red October. Danger, confronted properly, is not something a man must fear. The Hunt for Red October was originally published in 1984 by the Naval Institute Press, a publishers that was mostly targeted at active and retired US military. But their first foray ever into fiction would be a massive commercial success, with Clancy's debut novel being popular with both soldiers and civilians alike. The story featured what would become Clancy's most famous character, Jack Ryan, a Marine who suffered a serious back injury while serving and who now works for the Central Intelligence Agency. In his first literary outing, he must orchestrate the intended defection of a Soviet submarine commander crew who have grown tired of their roles in the Cold War. The film adaptation would see Sean Connery playing the role of their captain, Marco Ramius.
40 years I've been at sea. A war at sea. A war with no battles. No monuments. Only casualties. I widowed him the day I married him. My wife died while I was at sea, you know.
The literature of war is the literature of the most extreme emotion, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. It gives us the courage to face our fears, to hearing the acts of the bravest individuals, whilst giving a voice to those who suffered so much in the great wars of the past.